Yeah.
I'll look it up. You just say something real quick.
Okay. Hello, hello. Test, 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 test. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Is this working? Is this working? Is this working? Hello, hello. Okay. Yeah? Okay. Yes.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm gonna get us started. It's 7:30. I'm gonna try to be on schedule tonight. Thank you all so much for being here. If I haven't met you yet, I'm Shannon Simpson, Executive Director of Monterey Audubon Society. I'm holding this tiny little mic, not so you all can hear me better, but so the people that are at home can hear me better. We are live streaming. We try to always live stream on our YouTube channel, and we're incorporating some Zoom tonight and trying some new things. So thank you for being here in person. Couple of announcements. Super exciting announcement for Monterey Audubon. Actually, I have a couple super exciting ones for us. Number one is our membership is being tasked right now with voting in a new board member. So if you are a member and you have voted already, thank you so much. If you are a member and have not voted already, I told you all you could have an opportunity to vote in person tonight. Amy Gahn, did I say that right? Is it Gahn? Or Gann. Amy Gann is a local business owner of physical therapy practice here in Pacific Grove, and she is wanting to join our board to help bolster our birdability projects, which are birding for everybody, anybody and everybody, however your body works. And so I'm gonna put you all on the spot right now. I didn't do little paper slips. I'm gonna save the paper tonight. But if you are a member and you want to vote Amy onto our board, can you raise your hand? And if you are a member and you are not, and you are voting no to Amy on the board. Okay, great, fantastic. We have a new board member. Thank you for bearing with me on the housekeeping. Last year, we voted to change our membership, voted to change our bylaws, and that took away a lot of things from membership. But the thing that I advocated to keep for you all was your right to vote our board members on. We have long-serving board members and new board members, and we're really excited about where we're going. One of the places that we're going is we are hiring a new staff member. We have applications open they've been open for a few weeks, and we are keeping them open until this coming Friday. That is for a volunteer and community engagement manager. We are hoping this person is a mid-career professional, at least, that can come in and hit the ground running and help define some policies and procedures regarding our volunteers, and also jump in and help with our outreach and field trip programs while we're getting those policies and procedures written, and that will grow into a primarily just management role in the future. So if you or anybody you know is interested, I forgot to put it out. I'll put it out in just a sec. There's information on our website, montereyaudubon.org/careers, and you can find out more information about that. And then the other last super exciting thing that our board is very excited about is that starting next week, and this is going to be a huge change for you all, and by next week, I mean next month, we are moving our lectures. So our lectures are not going to be here at the PG Museum. They are going to be at Hopkins in the Boatworks Auditorium. So they have about 50 built-in seats and a room for an additional 50 or so more. So on a night like tonight, where we're all crowded in here, we won't be as crowded anymore. And they also have a microphone, and they have streaming AV services. So we're going to be a lot more accessible to a lot more people. And there's on-site parking as well. So we're very excited about this move. We're keeping our relationship with the PG Museum. We've got a business membership here, and we're going to continue to hold our board meetings here. But we are moving our lectures. So there's a sign out over there. Next month, Van Pierzlowski is coming to do our talk. And for those of you who don't know who that is, Van is the executive director of the California Bird Atlas Project. So he's going to come talk about this super cool 5-year initiative to outline all the breeding birds in the state of California. We're one of very few states who does not have a statewide Bird Atlas Project. Speaking of the Bird Atlas Project, Kai wanted to say a couple of things before I introduce our speaker.
Yes, hello, I am Kai Russell. I am a board member, and myself, Paul Fenwick, and Karen Krieger are the Monterey Regional Coordinators for the Breeding Bird Atlas. It is the first state atlas for California, so it's a really exciting project. It's going to take the next 5 years to collect all the data, and we are relying on you all. So of the people here, how many people are already using eBird? So that's really awesome to see. It's basically adding one extra question and asking you to record all of the breeding behavior that you are seeing. It might seem kind of mysterious and intimidating, but we are here to help answer any questions you might have about how best to code breeding birds when you're out in the field. We've got some pamphlets here that you can come and take a picture of, or you could bring one home that tell you how to get started with the Breeding Bird Atlas. Karen, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, so has everyone joined California Bird Atlas? You have, yes, show of hands? Okay, great. So what we would love for everyone to do is to go to californiabirdatlas.com or .org, excuse me, and just click on join the project, and you enter your email address. And then the next time you do an eBird list, you'll see a little pop-up that says join the project, and you click on that. And then you just bird as you would normally bird on eBird, and you'll have an Atlas checklist, and that will go into this incredible repository of data that we're collecting, and you'll be part of the Atlas project. So we're really encouraging people to join us. It's a really awesome project. So I hope you all will join us. And if you have any questions, you can DM me or Paul or Kai, and we'll do our best to answer all your questions.
Yeah, we also have a email, montereyBirdAtlas@gmail.com, and we'll be taking a look at that and trying to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
And one last plug is if you haven't renewed your membership for Monterey Audubon Society yet, please do so. And we've got the Monterey Birds book up here for sale if anybody is interested and hasn't gotten one of those yet. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to John Tsortos. John is a Monterey Audubon Society volunteer who helps a lot with our Sea Watch program. John also is one of those amazing crew that is a backup counter for Allison that helps us give Allison a day off once a week during her season out here. So take it away. Thank you.
There we go. Alrighty. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited for you all to be here. I have a lot to cover tonight. So many slides. I don't know how much we'll get through today. If at any point you need me to repeat something or you want me to replay a video, just go ahead, raise your hand or just call out and let me know. But yeah, let's get right into it. Tonight's talk is going to be on the subantarctic region of New Zealand and Australia. Pictured here, we have a southern giant petrel flying over a king penguin rookery on Macquarie Island. And all the photos in here are my own, unless otherwise noted. If you want to find more of my work, it's on Instagram. So I went on an expedition cruise back in December of last year. So as a reminder, we're in the Southern Hemisphere, so December is like late spring. This is the ship that we went on, and the company was Heritage Expeditions. The expedition cruise had about 140 passengers, and this was a really unique expedition cruise because most of the passengers were birders. Oftentimes, when you go on an expedition cruise, you have maybe a handful of birders, but most people just want to go to Antarctica or see their first penguin or something like that. But this cruise, specifically called Birding Down Under, so it caters to birders, and that was really unique. There were a lot of expedition staff, like geologists and historians, who were like a little weirded out by all the birders like being on deck all of the time. So yeah, interesting experience. So I was one of 9 scholarship recipients. Heritage Expeditions does this True Young Explorer Scholarship to get young people exposure to these regions. Most of these cruises are really expensive. So as scholarship recipients, we were just passengers. We didn't have any specific responsibilities. And they essentially give us a significantly discounted ticket, which is awesome. So we were going to the subantarctic. Very first thing I want to emphasize, subantarctic is not Antarctic. There was no, sea ice, no large white landscapes. The furthest south that we ever went was Macquarie Island, which was just under halfway between New Zealand, that's the bottom of the South Island there, and Antarctica. So very different environment. We're kind of in the 40s and the 50s. which have these names, roaring 40s, furious 50s. That's for the really intense wind and rain and seas that these regions experience. They're also known as the albatross latitudes. Our albatrosses are really big birds. They rely on wind, so of course they're going to live in the areas with the most wind possible. Temperatures generally were in the low 40s. We didn't have any ice or anything like that, but these islands had plants, which were really cool. If you've been down to like the Antarctic Peninsula and you've been to South Georgia or the Falkland Islands, or you've heard of them, it's kind of a similar situation to where we were going. So this is what the cruise route looked like. So we start at the bottom of the South Island. We go south to the Snares, then to Auckland Islands, Macquarie, and then we start going north, east to Campbell, Bounty, Antipodes, Chatham, and then back. So the orange points are islands where we could actually get on land and walk around. The blue points were islands where we only did a ship's cruise around, or maybe we anchored and did some Zodiac cruises around. But these islands are just either too small or literally just massive boulders in the middle of the ocean. You can't really land on them. And what's really special about this specific cruise that I went on is it hits these 3 island groups. So like I said, these 2 islands we can't get on. Chatham's are out here. This is really far, out of the way for most cruises. Most cruises that go through this region are going to hit some combination of these islands. But this is the only cruise that Heritage Expeditions does that hits these 3. And I believe it's the only cruise potentially in the world that hits these islands. So it's a really unique opportunity. And they only do this cruise once a year. So it's once a year, there's a ship that goes out there. And other than that, if you're not a researcher, you're not really getting out there. So we have a similar map to what we just saw. This is a map of wind conditions in that area. So like I said, the subantarctic is known for crazy winds. In a couple of days, this is what's going to be blowing through that region. So this is 40 plus knots of wind coming in. It's not like this all the time, but it does happen. And a lot of these islands are pretty small. So, that's just the nature of expedition travel. It makes things interesting. But like I said, our seabirds really like that area. Our seabirds in this area, the diversity in this region is just astounding. In terms of the albatross and penguins, it's unparalleled anywhere else in the world. So these are all the species of albatross and penguins that breed in the region that we saw on our trip. So we have 14 different species here, and whether or not some of these are species, you can make a decision for yourself. Albatross taxonomy is really confusing, but this is essentially what we saw on the trip. Anything in red is an endemic breeding species, so they breed in this region and that region only, nowhere else in the world. Some of these black species are maybe a bit more circumpolar, have other breeding ranges, and then penguins. So half the penguins we saw are endemic to the region. And then what is that? Eight species are endemic to the region, and a 9th subspecies endemic to the region. So a lot of albatross names were just put up on the slide there. So let's put everything into reference for what we might know. So in California here, we get black-footed albatross. Maybe some of you guys have seen these. These birds have a wingspan of 6, maybe closer to 7 feet if it's a larger individual. These are an example of some of the albatrosses we see down in the subantarctic. So this here is a Salvin's albatross. Its wingspan reaches 8-ish feet. So the Salvin's already is bigger than our black-footed albatross. And then you have these crazy great albatrosses down there that dwarf the Salvin's albatross. This is the Southern Royal albatross. Its wingspan can reach up to 11 feet if it's a larger individual. So there are some albatrosses in this region that are more similar to Blackfoots, but most of them are really, really big. So another thing I guess one of the reasons why this area has so much diversity in seabirds is because of the really interesting geology there. So there are 7 different island groups in this region, and they all kind of formed at different times or in different ways than each other. So what that means is, land is kind of appearing in the ocean at different times, and it's allowing species to kind of propagate or discover these areas and colonize them at different times. And fortunately, these land masses are far enough away that you get pretty good speciation between them, but they're not so far away that you can't visit them in one expedition cruise. So that's kind of what's going on here. I have a very high level geologic history of some of these areas, but some of these islands are volcanic, others aren't. One of them's like oceanic crust that's like above the surface. It's really, really fascinating. But the main takeaway from this is these islands are full of all sorts of endemic plants, insects, ducks, cormorants, albatross, penguins, you name it. And there's a lot of differences between the different islands. Oh, my camera's not on? Okay, no worries. Let me, how do I do this? Zoom bar up at the top of the screen. I am lost. Hang on. Is there a video here? Oh, this one over here? I don't know how to do this. Do I need my video on? Oh, there we go. Not your audio, the video. Okay. Sorry. That's all right. I don't know how to get back to where I was. Where's my presentation? Okay. Three fingers swipe to the right. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Liam. Okay, shout out to Liam. All right, we're underway. Okay, so we got all the context out of the way. Let's get into the expedition. So the first island group that we went to are the Snares. And the Snares is this tiny little group of islands, really close to, this is the bottom of the South Island, New Zealand. This is Stewart Island here. So just overnight, day one, we made it out to the Snares. And the Snares are home to, I believe, the largest breeding colony of sooty shearwaters in the world. Sooty shearwaters breed in a lot of different areas, but I think this is where their highest density is. And sooty shearwaters are one of California's seabirds. So they breed down at the bottom of the southern hemisphere, and then when they're done breeding, they come up into the northern hemisphere. And the coast of California is one of the areas they spend the southern hemisphere winter in. So this was like a really, really special experience for me. We got there right at sunrise. Sooty shearwaters nocturnal, they visit their breeding colonies at night, and then in the early morning, they disperse from the colonies. So the very first thing that we saw when we got down there were just thousands of sooty shearwaters streaming out of the Snares at sunrise. It's a little hard to see, but it's like anywhere you look, there are just sooty shearwaters everywhere. And it's really weird to see sooty shearwaters flying this high in the sky. We're used to them flying right over the water over here. But that was pretty special. And then there are these massive rafts of birds. So it's a little hard to see, but once they take flight, you'll see it. But all of these birds here, it's just like a carpet of sooty shearwaters on the water. And as we approach with the ship, they're all going to take flight, and everywhere crawling with birds. It was pretty spectacular. At least 1 million. There used to be at least 2 million in excess of that. We know that they've been declining, but I don't know what the actual estimates are. No audio. I mean, the audio is just going to be like the ship being really loud, and yeah. Unfortunately, the sooty shearwater vocalization is really cool. Unfortunately, we didn't really get to hear that. And then, okay, cool. So we get to the Snares, and then this is an island we don't get to land on, but we do get to Zodiac cruise. So for people that don't know what Zodiacs are, this is what it is. It's like a small, little vessel, about 8 to 10 people sit in it. So you get in the Zodiac and you go roam around the island. And we get to go nice and close and see what's going on there. So here we have a large group of Snares crested penguins, and then some beautiful, this area just has crazy kelp. So we have Snares crested penguins there. This is an endemic penguin to this one little group of islands. And in order to get in and out of the water, they climb through the kelp, which is just so fascinating. And there's going to be a little one that pops up here. He struggles a little and gets slammed into the rock and has to try again. Being a penguin is not easy. But you get some really cool photos of the penguins just in the kelp, and it's really an incredible experience. Unfortunately, we spent about 3 minutes in the Zodiacs, and then we hear on the radio that the operation's been canceled because the swell was starting to increase, and we had to get back onto the ship. So that's the nature of expedition travel. We could have easily spent an hour and a half in our Zodiacs hanging out with these penguins, but sometimes the conditions change and safety is better than risking your life to see some penguins. But this was really, really special. But we had, we had a whole morning to fill. We couldn't Zodiac cruise around here. So what we actually did is we did a ship's cruise out to the western chain of islands here, which normally you don't get to visit. And this is a colony of Salvin's albatross that breed on the western chain. This is a small colony. The main colony is on the Bounties, but this is pretty cool. So you have different Salvin's albatrosses here. And if you look closely at some sections of the photo, you might see a stray penguin that's wandered up these rocky cliffs. You might see a little chick sitting on a nest. And you might even notice this is a skua eating something. We don't know what it is, but they're always around looking for opportunities to eat things. So that was our experience of the snares. Then we roamed on down to the Auckland Islands, specifically Enderby Island right at the top there. So Enderby Island is going to be our first landing, the first time going through biosecurity process. So, these are like pristine islands with, super vulnerable endemic species. So we need to make sure we're not introducing anything onto these islands. So we did a really intense process on board. All the outer layers you're going to be wearing were inspected a day before. All dirt, sand, organic matter, everything was taken off. We had to soak anything that was going to be touching the ground in biocide to just make sure nothing like avian influenza, anything like that's getting onto the islands. And then some islands don't even allow sitting or kneeling for risks of avian influenza. So here we are in Enderby Island. This was the one spot on the island where we could put our bags down and get ready before we did a full day hike around the island. So just this one little bench there. And then the rest of the time we could not sit down or put anything down on the ground. So the other thing when you're visiting these islands is your expedition company has a special permit that allows them to visit these islands. And these permits have, different rules. So you can't, be more than, or you can't be closer than 5 meters to these birds, or if these birds have a nest, you have to be at least 50 meters away. So there's a lot of different guidelines you kind of have to keep in the back of your head, but fortunately you're always under the supervision of expedition guides. So it's not like we land on these islands and we just get to go run around for a few hours. We're, either in a section of beach where we can wander, or we're being like guided on a hike throughout the island. Awesome. Okay, so so for Enderby Island, one of the really sensitive species there is a yellow-eyed penguin. And right where we land, there's like this yellow-eyed penguin walkway to get to the ocean. And we need to wait for that to be entirely clear of yellow-eyed penguins before we can walk through and begin our hike. So right when we got there, we had this little group here of yellow-eyed penguins. So they had gotten through the grassy walkway and they're getting ready to go through the beach and go swimming. But yellow-eyed penguins are very timid. And for whatever reason, they're like, nope, we're not going to go out to the beach. And then they hung out there for a few minutes, like not really sure what to do. Eventually, they did wander off and go out to the ocean. And then we were able to walk across that area. But super cool penguins. We'll hear about them more in just a moment. So once we started hiking through the island, we were immediately met with some southern royal albatross nests. So they nest on the ground. There's a small colony on this island. Most of them are elsewhere on Campbell Island. And in the distance, we're able to witness some gamming. We'll talk about gamming a little later when we get to Campbell Island. But that's just some flirtatious courting between younger albatross that aren't really ready to start breeding. We managed to also see a subantarctic snipe. So there are snipe species that live on these different islands, which is just incredible. And almost every island group that we go to either has an endemic species of snipe or an endemic subspecies of snipe. So the subantarctic snipe is the one on Enderby Island. They have slightly down-curved bills, so a little different than our snipes, but they still do, kind of that aerial courtship display at night to reproduce. But what's interesting is when you're flushing them, so like when we're walking through the grass on our hike and we'd flush one, it just scurries through the grass, almost like a rodent, which was really fascinating. Here, usually they're just going to fly off. But I thought that was really interesting. So yeah, subantarctic snipe here. And then we also have some of the endemic mega herbs on Enderby Island. So I think this is the Bulbinella rossi, if I remember correctly, but I'm not a plant person. So we saw our snipes. And then let's see. So we saw the snipes on this boardwalk here. We were walking in like this massive field of these endemic flowers. This was a particularly good spring for the blooming of a lot of the mega herbs down there. So it doesn't always look like this, but it was just incredible. And to get through, this field of endemic flowers, they had a boardwalk for us, which is really nice. We weren't disturbing the scenery as we we're going through. We got to the end of the boardwalk, and then we were on the northern end of the island. So this is the exposed end of the island. All of a sudden, the wind started blowing like crazy. People were falling over. It was just wild. I think the wind was like 30 knots that day. And somehow, in these rocky cliffs, we have light-mantled sooty albatrosses that are nesting. So they have these little nests in the mud here. I don't know how a bird that large with these big wings can like take flight when the wind is blowing that strong and there's rocky cliffs to be crashed into if you mess up. But somehow this is where they nest and they make it work for them. Here's a little video of what the tussock grass was doing just right at the edge there. So just crazy. Let's see, what do we have next here? Oh yeah, we also witnessed an upside down waterfall. So this, the wind was blowing so intensely. I'll play that again. The wind was blowing so intensely that this was constant. It wasn't just like, oh, there's one gust, look, there's water being sprayed. No, it was doing that the whole time. And we had to walk right past it. So that was fun. Also on the edge of the island, we got to see some of the endemic cormorant species there, the Auckland Island shag. A lot of these islands have endemic cormorants. And we also got to see the New Zealand sea lion. I have a love-hate relationship with these guys. I think they're really cool. But there were a lot of young males on the island, and they were territorial and kind of testing out, their territory and how to chase things down. So it almost felt like they were like an enemy, like in a video game. Like if you got too close to them, they would like be alert and they'd go after you. So there were so many times where we were getting bluff charged by New Zealand sea lions. And as long as you held your ground and kind of like stuck your backpack out or a pole or something, they would stop and just look at you. But, it's still a large marine mammal that's like charging at you aggressively. So, and they were everywhere. It's not like they're just on the beach. They were like literally everywhere. Like you'd be walking through the grass and all of a sudden the grass next to you would like snort or burp and then a head would, poke up and now you're running away from it. So they're interesting. But there were a couple of times I was getting a little annoyed. I wanted to do bird watching and these guys weren't letting me. Also in the grass, we had some skuas that were nesting. We'll see more on skuas later. But something super cool. So we covered I think we covered maybe 10 kilometers in this hike. It was like a really long full day hike. We got to come across a lot of skua pellets. So skuas are predatory seabirds and they primarily eat other seabirds. So like an owl pellet, they poop out fur and rodent bones. Skuas poop out seabird feathers and seabird bones. So here's a yellow-eyed penguin foot bone, I believe. This may be some like petrel or prion. This looks like maybe the skull of a tube nose, but I'm not sure. And there were many, many pellets. And I was fascinated by each and every single one of them. So I photographed all of them. But yeah, super interesting. There were also some endemic passerines on these islands. So here's the tom tit on one of the endemic mega herbs as well. The tom tits are on a lot of these islands. They're super hardy little songbirds, but you can also see them on the North Island and South Island in New Zealand. And because they, they grow up on an island with no mammalian predators, these birds are just like walking around at your feet willy-nilly. It was really special, the kind of experience we had with them. They're different subspecies, yes. And then we had a lot of really good looks at yellow-eyed penguins as we were walking through the island. So these are some, up-close looks. So the yellow-eyed penguin, or hoiho in Maori, are the only penguin in their genus. So they're like a really, really unique penguin, not like anything else you see elsewhere in the world. And it's a very old genus. These might be one of the oldest penguin species. But yeah, like this is the only place in the world that you can really see them. So these guys were super special. And sometimes they'd pose for you with the mega herbs and you get really beautiful photos. We also had northern giant petrels. These guys were just lounging around. I expected them to be a bit more ferocious, but I don't know, on Enderby Island, I guess they were all just taking it easy. except for this guy. This guy was posturing on this dead sea lion. So northern giant petrels are like scavengers, but they also do a bit of hunting or like encourage things to die faster so they can scavenge them. So I give it maybe like another day or two before the giant petrels are just going crazy fighting over this carcass. But right now it seems maybe a little too fresh. No one really wants to bite into it. We also saw a pair of bar-tailed godwits down here. So bar-tailed godwits breed at the top of Alaska, go all the way down to New Zealand and Australia, and apparently also the sub-Antarctic islands occasionally. And they do that return flight in one go, right, without stopping. So not only just, they could go to New Zealand and stop early, or they could keep going down to Enderby Island, which is even further south. So that was really cool. So yeah, we were at Enderby in the during the day. Then we had dinner as we were like sailing south. And right around sunset, we went by Adams Island. And like I said, a lot of these seabirds visit their breeding sites at night. So as you're going past Adams Island, just past sunset, all of these birds are getting ready to head into their burrows at night and feed their chicks. So you have like a mix of sooty shearwaters, different prion species, white-headed petrels, which is a pterodroma species, white-capped albatrosses. I mean, the waves were like crawling with birds. It was so cool, and like so many different species. This is really special. So the Auckland Islands are really interesting because most of all the small islands around the main Auckland Island in the center are pest-free. And some of that was just, the islands are so inaccessible that things like cats or bunnies or mice, whatever we were introducing on the other islands, couldn't really colonize them. But yeah, some of the islands, like they had to do full-blown eradications on. So Enderby Island, the island that we hiked through, back in the early 90s, they actually went through and got rid of everything that humans introduced there. So people were occupying these islands for whaling or for sealing or I don't know, other reasons. Some islands are advertised as pasture land, which I think is a little crazy given the conditions. But yeah, so a lot of work's been done to eradicate pests from a lot of these islands. The one island, the only island in the region left that still needs eradication is Auckland Island. So that's the main one in the middle. We have a little map here. So Enderby was up here. Adams is down here with all these nesting seabirds. But this big island right in the middle is still covered in pigs, cats, and mice. So there's a massive fundraising effort right now. They need to raise $80 million to fund this project. But New Zealanders know how to do this. Like they've done it many times before. They're the best in the world at it. And some of these, we'll talk about some of these islands later, but some of these projects are really astounding. Really large islands and really hard to get critters, and they're able to do it. So if you can eradicate all the pests on Auckland Islands, I mean, like, look how big the main island is compared to all these other ones. Like almost the entire world population of the New Zealand white-capped albatross breed on this tiny little island here. Of maybe like 4 or 5% breed on the main Auckland Islands. So if you can remove these pests, you're returning a lot of habitat to yellow-eyed penguins, snipes, etc. So really cool stuff. You can read about it. It's pretty complicated. There's an order in which you need to eradicate things too, and different methods for different animals. It's really interesting. So once we moved on from the Auckland Islands, we spent a lot of time at sea. So that's, another cool thing about this expedition cruise. When you're birder, it's not, you're not just paying attention when you're on land, but when you're like motoring between islands, like that's really prime seabirding time, right? So we had a lot of sea days right in the middle of the trip. And the expected seabirds really kind of change. The first few days we're seeing a lot of Cook's petrels, and then for the next few days you're seeing a lot of white-headed petrels, and then the next few days you're seeing, soft plumage petrels. Like there are these interesting zones. They had lectures for non-birders during the day. These were also really good times for cetacean diversity, and the expedition leader would do, a really good job of being like, hey, for the next 2 hours, we're over this deep water canyon. There's a lot of food here. We're probably going to see cetaceans, to get people out on deck and to know what to expect. And then when something really exciting gets seen, they would use the PA system and let people know if it's like a little bing bong noise. So this is kind of a map of the ship. So what I learned was, depending on where you stood on the ship, you would see different things. So like in the back of the ship, there was always at least a few albatross following us. But the front of the ship was a lot better for like more skittish birds. So things like storm petrels or pterodroma petrels. that don't want anything to do with the ship. Like once they kind of see it, they leave. And if you're just in the back waiting for them, you don't really get a good look at them when they're going by there. And then deck 8, all the way at the very top, was really good for spotting cetaceans. But there's room to, you know, observe from here on the side and here on the side, and in the back of deck 7, in the back of deck 6. Like there was a lot of space. So even though we were 140 birders, it never felt super crowded, which was nice. So looking at some of the birds in these different zones. So like I said, you know, like when we're at more temperate latitudes, you have certain seabirds. And then once you get into the more subantarctic latitudes, you get other ones. So whenever we were like in line with the New Zealand mainland, so like more so for the second half of the trip, we'd see a lot of Cook's petrels. We started seeing bowler shearwaters in the last 5 or 6 days of the trip, and gray-faced petrels. But once we're in more subantarctic waters, we were seeing these petrels. From the back, we don't really know what we're looking at, but once you get a look at the underside of these birds, you realize, oh, look, we have 3 different species. We have the mottled petrel over here, the soft plumage petrel, and then the white-headed petrel. So these are all birds that breed in different islands in the subantarctic region. The mottled petrel is endemic breeder to the New Zealand region, but the soft plumage and white-headed petrels are a bit more, they spread out into the subantarctic of like the Indian Oceans or the South Atlantic Oceans in some cases. We also saw some storm petrels. These were the 3 main species. So they all breed in the subantarctic as well. There was a 4th species, Wilson storm petrel, that we saw occasionally, but they're more Antarctic breeders. Storm petrel photos, you know, not super great from a massive ship. I mean, it's already a hard bird to photograph when you're standing on a ship, you know, multiple stories above the ocean and you're photographing. I mean, the storm petrels, for anyone who isn't familiar, like if you look at some of the swallows in the exhibit here, that's how big these birds are. And they're getting lost in, you know, the waves at sea. So it's pretty challenging. These were the best photos I could get. This one I took on my first trip to New Zealand from a small ship. That's why it looks so clean. Okay, so next group of seabirds we were seeing on sea days were prions. So for anyone who's intimidated by really challenging identification, avert your eyes. The prions are scary birds. So here are some prions. These are 4 different species. They all look almost identical. So you know, a really big thing to look at with prions is like the shape of the head and the bill. If you look like close enough, it's like, okay, this one's like a blackish bill and it's a little larger, because that one's a bit paler and smaller. That one's like paler and narrower, but it's really, really challenging. And you know, the nice thing about a cruise like this is, you know, which islands you're close to, so you can kind of expect. It's like, okay, this island is where all the Antarctic prions breed, so most of the prions we're seeing are Antarctic, and then these islands are where the Fulmar prions breed. But when you're in between islands, it's like, you know, a crapshoot. You have no idea, so you're just firing away with your camera, and then you're like you're zooming in on the bill and staring at it. And for anyone who thinks, you know, this is easy, they know exactly what's going on here. There's this photo that I took. We have a bird that's very confidently an Antarctic prion, and then we have this other bird that doesn't match any of the other 3 species I showed before. The bill's too small to be broad-billed, but the bill's too big to be a Fulmar or a fairy prion. The tail band looks kind of narrow, but if you look at this bird and this bird, they don't look like super similar. Like if you zoom in a bit more, like this one kind of has like maybe a bigger head and it's like a bit more compact than this bird, longer tail, longer head, bill color's a little different. Who knows what's going on? They're probably both Antarctic prions, but who knows? Maybe this bird breeds on a different island than these other Antarctic prions. Maybe there are subspecies we don't understand. These birds are super understudied. So anyway, that's what's going on with the prions. And to make matters worse, they were flying in very interesting ways. So I have a video here of some of our prions. So this tiny little thing, it's a prion. And yeah, oh no, seriously. Yeah, there goes another one. So like halfway through the trip, I started talking to the guides. I'm like, what are these prions doing? I've never seen a tube nose fly like this ever before. How do they do that? And they're like, oh, that's not how they normally fly. They're riding the updrafts that are created by this massive ship as it moves. So then I'm like, well, that explains things. I don't know how they propel themselves, but yeah, anyway, the prions were a nightmare. Oh no. Oftentimes I just ignored them. But anyway, we also saw cetaceans on the ship or on the trip. We had longfin pilot whales, which were really cool. We had like a massive pod of these. They usually move around in really big groups. We actually had some bottlenose dolphins. I didn't realize there were bottlenose dolphins in the sub-Antarctic, but then we also saw a Gray's beaked whale. I couldn't tell you why this is a Gray's beaked whale specifically and none of any of the other beaked whales, but that's what the experts told me and I believe them. So sea days are really interesting because, you know, you spend a couple hours looking out at the ocean, you get a little tired of it, you go inside, oh, you know, maybe you go for a little hot tub, you know, spa day. So there were a couple times where I was in the hot tub when I shouldn't have been, and that's because really exciting things were seen. So the first instance of that, I'm sitting there in the hot tub at the very top of the ship, and I see one of the expedition. There's like a window, you can see the upper deck, and I see one of the expedition guides like sprinting across the upper deck from where she was watching the ocean. I was like, oh crap, something's gonna happen. So, you know, I'm like preemptively getting out, getting into the robe. We hear the bing bong, and they're calling out hourglass dolphins, which are like the most beautiful species of dolphin. They get the name hourglass because they kind of have like an hourglass shape on the side of their bodies. So I'm like, I have to see these. I sprint out in my bathing suits and my robe and my flip flops, and I'm watching them. And I'm like, I think there's enough time for me to run down 5 stairs, you know, 5 sets of stairs, and come back up with my camera. And I did, and I managed to get some photos, which was really nice. The day prior to this, a similar thing happened. So I was in the hot tub again. We hear a bing bong. But we don't hear the announcements. It's kind of like, you know, really quick, kind of quiet. We didn't get anything. And then we hear the bing bong again a few seconds later, and there's a much louder announcement. So my friend jumps out of the hot tub. She runs into the little room to hear the PA. And they say something about a petrel. She comes back in. She's like, I don't know, some petrel. And I'm like, oh my God. So I jump out of the hot tub. I like run in to get my towel. And some of the ladies in the steam room are screaming magenta petrel. In other words, a tycho. So this is one of the rarest seabirds in the world. There's like maybe 100 to 200. And this is what's being called out. And, you know, for the past 10 days, I've been seeing petrels that are like this. And, you know, they don't want anything to do with the ship. So you see them for a few seconds and then they're gone. So by the time I had gotten out and, you know, I had my towel on, it's like, it's already been a minute. I'm going to run all the way out there in my bathing suit, look like an idiot, and the bird's going to be gone. Right. So I was like, you know, it's gone, whatever. I run into Oscar, one of the bird guides later. I'm like, so Oscar, you know, like, you see anything good today? He's like, oh my gosh, don't tell me you missed it. So he started showing me the photos on his computer. It turns out this bird was following us for a few minutes, and they were getting like some of the most incredible at-sea photos of the species ever. So I had to live with this one, and it was painful. So that's why, you know, this time I was a bit more prepared. I was a bit more on it. But fortunately, we saw some magenta petrels later, not to spoil things. Up next, after a sea days, we get to Macquarie Island. This is where you get like penguin overload. So there are 4 species of penguins on Macquarie Island. Yeah, I'll spend a bit more time here. These are king penguins. We have some young birds. These guys are finishing their final molt before they're ready to go live on their own. But yeah, we have 4 different species on Macquarie Island: gentoo penguin, royal penguin, which is endemic, the king penguin, and then eastern rockhopper. The rockhopper penguins are a little inaccessible, but the other 3 you got to spend quite a bit of time on land with. And we really got to study the differences between them. And it's really interesting. The different species of penguins have their own personalities. The gentoo penguins, to me, felt like maybe the most confident. Like they kind of just went about their business. They didn't care if there were people there. They weren't, you know, hesitating. We saw the yellow-eyed penguins earlier. They were very skittish. Gentoo penguins didn't care. They're going swimming. They're going swimming. They don't care who's in their way. They nested out in these grassy areas, which was really interesting. And then, you know, they'd gather some of this grass and build these nests. But there were some mischievous birds in the area that were prematurely reusing their nesting material. So you had these cormorants flying in, grabbing a bunch of nesting material off of a gentoo penguin nest that's in use, and then flying off with the nesting material. So that was pretty entertaining. And this is another endemic cormorant species. It's been lumped recently, but this is an endemic subspecies. And they have the craziest eye ring, like this crazy purple color. Really, really beautiful birds. And they were just flying like right overhead, back and forth to the gentoo colony and then to wherever they were nesting and back. The gentoo penguins also weren't afraid to ward off potential predators. So here we have a subantarctic skua that was getting a little too close to the gentoo penguin, and you have to show him who is boss. So I assume this is kind of like an intimidating pose, make yourself big and tall and scare off the bad birds. We had royal penguins, which, like I said, are endemic to Macquarie Island. Kind of similar to macaroni penguin, and maybe the same species depending on who you ask, but I consider them different. This is the largest colony that we could see. There's a boardwalk that takes you out quite a bit closer than we were able to go, but unfortunately there were giant petrels nesting right next to the boardwalk. We have to maintain a certain distance from their nests. That closes down the boardwalk. So we could look in the distance and see the really big colony. But there were plenty on the beach for us to hang out with. So here's a group that walk up to us and kind of check us out. The royal penguins are also like pretty confident, I felt, but there was a bit more hesitation than the gentoos. And then there's some indecision, maybe some disagreements, perhaps. It's a lot of little squabbling and yelling at each other. And there's one of those disagreements, and then they all decide that maybe it's time to go for a swim. So they hop into the water and just zip right off. So they were awesome. Then here's a fun photo that I got. Royal penguins do not like giant petrels. So this guy was taking a nap on the beach, and the second he got up, you can kind of see this like social distancing little circle forming here. Giant petrels will go after, chicks or eggs, or like injured or weak or dying penguins. So, not a lot of birds want to hang out with them. Royal penguins, fantastic swimmers, a lot of really great opportunities to see them porpoising. You can see that the gape here looks really like fleshy. So as these birds are, swimming in cold water, blood really starts pumping to these areas to keep them warm. So you could tell a penguin just got out of the ocean when you look at the gape, and it's like really like fleshy and like pink like that. There's a lot of blood flowing there. Like I said, sometimes they get in arguments. And if you get a nice photo at the right angle, you can actually see into the mouth. So these are papillae, I believe. So they're like keratin spikes in the mouth of the penguin that helps, catch fish, hold on to them, and swallow them down. And I think this is something that pretty well all penguins have, but we got a really good look on the royal penguins. We also got to spend a lot of time with king penguins. King penguins take, I think they have like a 14-month breeding cycle. It's the longest, I think, out of all the penguins. But what's really interesting is, because it's longer than a year, you kind of have these breeding cycles like overlapping with each other. So you might see some penguins, mating while at the same time that penguins are sitting on eggs, at the same time that, eggs are hatching, or you have like really old chicks. Like all of this is kind of happening at once. So here we have some penguins that are incubating eggs, and, occasionally they would look down and check on their egg, and you could get a look at what the eggs look like. We also had the previous year's chicks, pretty close to moving on with the rest of their life and living life on their own. So they're molting, this guy's molting here. Some of these penguins look really adorable. Some of them looked a bit more awkward. So yeah, I felt bad for this one. But yeah, there's so many of these penguins, about 8,000 of them on the beach that we were on, that, sometimes they were posed in really nice ways, and you get these beautiful backgrounds with them. So that was a lot of fun. Let's see, what video do we have here? We spent some time in the zodiacs hanging out with these penguins as well. And they're just incredible swimmers. Like it's effortless just watching them in the water. So yeah, this was really special. Let's see what other videos. We have a couple here. Yes, so the king penguins were pretty curious, and sometimes they'd walk right up to you, look at what was going on. You could, do like a 0.5 zoom. How tall are they? Like a few feet? Oh, actually, you'll see right here. So this one got really interested in my pants. Yeah, they were awesome. It was so cool. Let's see. I think this guy might shake off from the water and then walk off here. Yeah. Just got out from a swim. Yeah, so king penguins are awesome. Unfortunately, not everyone that visited these islands felt the same way about the penguins as we do. So in the 1800s, a lot of these islands were visited, and there were massive seal colonies, and people were killing the seals for their skin or for oil. Especially in the case of elephant seals, we'll talk about those in a second. They're massive, tons of blubber. Once the elephant seal population started to crash, they were like, oh, we'll just use the penguins instead. So they created these digesters on the island, and they were essentially just chucking penguins into the digesters. Across 3 decades, over 2 million penguins were estimated to have been digested. So yeah, I don't know. It's kind of crazy to spend 2 days with these animals and see how incredible they are, and then to be reminded of some of the awful things that people can do. But fortunately, those have not been in use for a very long time. So speaking of southern elephant seals, we saw some. These guys are insane. So we have northern elephant seals up here, which are massive, very impressive. The southern elephant seals are the real deal. So they can grow up to 35% longer than our northern elephant seals, and 120% heavier, like more than double the weight. So at a max length, 22.5 feet, 11,000 pounds, it's like insane. They dive deeper than ours as well. It's up to 1,400 meters in search of food. They're the largest sea lion in the world. Unfortunately, there were no adult males on Macquarie in December. I think they prefer the winter for breeding. But we were left with elephant seal wieners. So, important distinction here, not wieners like sausages. Wieners is then weaned off, their mother. But these guys were so adorable. The faces, the personality, just awesome. Sometimes they were a little mischievous. So here I have a little video here. So this big one back here is, he's getting on the nerves of some of the other elephant seals. I don't know if my audio is working. That's unfortunate, but he pushes that guy off and he just rolls away. It's just incredible. I wish I spent more time. I mean, there were a lot of birds that were distracting me. I wish I spent more time with these guys because they're just amazing. So back to the birds. So a lot of subantarctic skua. So skuas are some of my favorite seabirds. They're opportunistic predators. They, hunt other seabirds, steal food, all sorts of things. But they're also really intelligent. They can recognize and remember the appearance of bird banders. So, if someone bans one of these wearing a bright red jacket, next time they go out with a bright red jacket, the skuas are going to be freaking out. So the, scientists on the island kind of have to change outfits. And what's really interesting is once a bird's been banded, they'll recognize that color band on their leg, and they'll know that banded birds are of special interest to researchers because they might want to recapture those banded birds and, get updated data on them. So non-banded birds will actually protect the banded birds and put themselves in between, the banded bird and the researchers. It's awesome. The skuas were so cool. I was talking with one of the scientists on the island, and she was just blowing me away with these stories. Fortunately, if you aren't getting close enough looks at skuas, there are certain things you can do to entice them to come closer to you, such as pretending to be dead or injured on the beach. So I saw the skua was kind of looking around, is looking curious. It's like, I'm going to pretend to die. So I lay down on the ground, and within 5 seconds, the skua came right up to me, starts checking me out. It's pretty insane. Yeah. And it gets a little curious. The backpack straps especially are really interesting to the skuas because it looks like something they can pull on, maybe some flesh. So you'll see here in a second. They actually kind of sound like gulls when I heard them vocalizing. I never heard them vocalizing before, but it was pretty gull-like. And they move away like they look sinister the way they kind of walk around on the beach. Let's see what this guy's going to investigate. Looks like some skuas are tugging on kelp, which is something they don't eat. So there's selective intelligence here. If something looks similar to food, then they'll go after that regardless. So I had some fun photos of the skuas fighting over the kelp there. They even got a little territorial over the kelp, despite none of them being able to eat it. But I did see them eating actual food. They're a little squeamish. We have some penguin remains in the next slide here. But this skua was carrying around the bottom portion of what used to be a young penguin. And skuas do not waste anything. They all eat everything, right? So here it is holding the leg in its mouth. Here it is swallowing the entire leg and the foot, which is crazy. Kind of explains why the pellets look the way they did on Enderby Island. And I actually got to see one fly in with a royal penguin egg. So it probably stole this egg from one of the colonies, which is unfortunate for the penguin, but very interesting to observe. So once one school is interested in something, they're all interested in it. You know, kind of look like a game of football or something. This is one of my favorite photos here, just the positions, all trying to get that egg. It's a little hard to crack, so it took some fighting and posturing, and eventually they were able to crack it open and eat it. So while the egg, is uneaten, they're all, aggressive, attacking each other. Once one of them eats the egg, they're kind of just, okay, cool, just hanging out on the beach. Giant petrel walks over, what's going on? So yeah, super cool. We also saw lots of light-mantled sooty albatrosses, beautiful birds. They kind of have these like almost googly looking eyes. They were like soaring just endlessly along the cliffs on Macquarie Island. So anytime you looked up, you would just see like sooty albatross, the light-mantled sooty albatrosses just zipping around. So cool. This one comes in pretty close. You can just see it with the green hills. Unreal. And there's a reason why they soar, around the cliffs, because they nest right in those cliffs. So, some of them have these really wet, rocky nests on Enderby Island. Others have these nice little sheltered, soft nests in the grass. And these albatrosses are so cool because to court each other, they do these like synchronized flights. So I got a clip here of a pair that's doing some of that courtship together, and it's just amazing to watch. Unfortunately, it's only like 20 seconds of video. It was usually when this was happening, it was like super far away. But it's so special. Got some cool photos too of them flying together. So that was really special. We're gonna have to start blasting through some slides here. We also saw southern giant petrels. 10% of southern giant petrels are white morphs. It's like all white with some of these like Dalmatian-y like spots. But most of them look like this. They're southern giant petrels because of the tip of their bill. It's like kind of like a pale greenish color. Giant petrels, like I said, go after carcasses. This was a distant elephant seal carcass. These guys, some of them were sticking their heads right into these holes. Other ones were getting ready to try and push their competitors off the carcass and eat it. We also saw orcas around Macquarie Island. So the Antarctic type A orcas, although there's the population down there seems somewhat resident to Macquarie Island, and scientists might think it could be a distinct ecotype or species or subspecies. But these guys are going after penguins, and they're going after the elephant seal pups, the weaners. And when they're looking for weaners, they're like combing every little nook and cranny of the coastline looking for them. So you just kind of, you'll see them coming down the coastline into all the little coves and bays. And usually there are a couple of smaller orcas, like, like some subadults or some juveniles. Those ones will go into like each and every pool. And they're basically looking for an elephant seal pup to chase out into deeper water for an adult to attack it. I have a clip here of some of those orcas just roaming around. Pretty crazy seeing these guys. No, I'm on land. So these orcas, like I said, they're coming in really close to the shore because the weaners aren't really going super far out. They're kind of sticking close to the water if they are in the water. And then with the penguins, you have plenty coming and going. But this video is really interesting because you have this whole raft of penguins that are just nosing about, like preening, and then they start to realize that orcas are coming in. And then they start moving, and you see them just start porpoising and flying around and trying to get out of there. We didn't witness any predations while we were there, but just freaky. And at one point while I'm recording this, like this group of like 8 penguins like flies out of the water right in front of me onto the beach, like scurrying away, like they're terrified of these orcas. This giant petrel is very brave. I would not be sitting in the water if I were it. After Macquarie, we went to Campbell Island. Campbell Island is where almost the entire population of southern royal albatross breed. There are also some other endemic things there. We did a full day hike here led by one of the expedition guides who was actually on the team of conservationists that did the pest eradication. So that was like super cool. He lived on this island for 2 months with his team, setting out traps and baits, and knows what the island used to look like and knows what it looks like now after 20 years of being pest free, and it's really special. Oh no. Oh, okay, there we go. Okay, I don't know what was there before, but anyway, so we did this hike up Mount Honey. We were told, oh, there are going to be great views of the island. These were our views. It was like 30 to 40 knots of wind. We were barely standing on the summit. It was insane. But the whole time we're walking through this grass, and there were albatross nests. Can you spot the nest in this photo? Teeny little white dot there. So these albatross use the tussock grass to shield themselves and their nests, and that gives you some cool opportunities for photos. When the weather improved a little, we had some albatrosses flying in and landing, and we also had some gamming. So like I said, this is kind of like, like middle school, high school dance. You got teenagers, don't really know how to, court each other yet. So they're figuring things out. So these birds aren't going to breed, but they're like practicing their courtship with each other. Got some nice photos of them soaring over land. We found this mystery item on land. Any guesses as to what this might be? It's like some type of beak. Squid beak, yeah. So this is a squid beak. Chances are it came from the stomach of an albatross because this is primarily what they eat. So that was like, I thought that was the coolest thing. They also have the Campbell Island teal, which is a flightless endemic duck. It was reintroduced to Campbell Island once they completed the pest eradication. And it was actually believed to be extinct until the 70s when a couple of conservationists rediscovered it, one of which being Heritage Expeditions founder, which is really cool. So they rediscovered it, kind of had some captive breeding going on, and when they eradicated the pests, they reintroduced it. But it forages along the coast and tide pools, which is pretty interesting. And it's nocturnal to avoid skuas, probably. We also saw Campbell albatross. Entire world population breeds on this island, and not just on this island, but like on this one set of cliffs on the north end of the island. All of these little white dots here are albatross. Thousands of pairs breed across these cliffs. Just unreal seeing that. Here's like really zoomed in photo. Like all of these white dots are albatrosses with like 7-8 foot wingspans. I have a few more slides. Okay, if we go a couple minutes over, we're at like 8:31. Okay, that's fine. So there's a lot of cool things to show. But yeah, this was like unreal. Unfortunately, the lighting was awful. It was sunset. I wish I got better photos, but just seeing it in person was like magical. After Campbell Island, we went to the Antipodes. So these are one of the islands that very few people get to go to. They have a couple of endemic parakeet species. The Antipodes parakeet's interesting. It's a little larger. Part of its diet is actually carrion. So it like scavenges dead birds or dead seals. There are a lot of fur seals that breed there. Erect crested penguins can be found here as well. Here's one with its chick. And then the Antipodean albatross, the entire world population breeds on this one island. This is a really interesting albatross species, one of the wandering type albatrosses. They're dealing with some pretty interesting conservation risks right now. So when they're not breeding, the males and females forage in different areas. And what they've been seeing is there's a general decline in the species, but the females have this really, really steep decline. And it's taken researchers a little while to figure out why that's happening. And their theory is, well, the females are going to different waters to forage, and in those waters, long line fishing is more prevalent. And this is a really big risk for these albatross. So we had a lady on the ship who works on something called the hook pod, which is something that you can actually put on your hook when you're doing long line fishing. And it's this plastic case that doesn't open until that hook has gone like 20, 30 meters below the surface of the water. So the fishermen can keep fishing the same way that they have, but those hooks won't be biteable by albatross until they're way too deep for an albatross to get it. So it's really interesting. They're really trying to raise funds for this and have been spreading it with different fishing communities. That's one of the big hopes for this, but I don't know, it's a crazy conservation risk. Like, what do you do in that case? And of course, seabirds move, right? So it's tough, but that's a really big risk. And hopefully those hook pods will be helpful. We got to explore some caves on the Antipodes. In these caves, really beautiful. Southern bull kelp down here is awesome. We saw some really cool invertebrates. So we had a hula skirt siphonophore here, and then a couple of comb jellies. This one, I'm not sure what's going on with this guy. It's like this really massive comb jelly right at the surface. This one was like, blew my mind because it's red. If you've been to Monterey Bay Aquarium, we know that red comb jellies are deep sea species. So these are some photos I took of the aquarium. So what's this red comb jelly doing at the surface? So I've been communicating with some comb jelly researchers, and this is actually an undescribed subantarctic species of comb jellyfish that does occur in very deep waters. But during high upwelling, they get brought to the surface, and you get to see them. And that's the same case with the hula skirt siphonophore, usually found like thousands of feet below the surface. But we had some really cool upwelling in the area, and that upwelling was attracting a bunch of Cape petrels or pintado petrels that were feeding on like krill from the surface, kind of like phalaropes. It was really, really cool. They're just kind of pecking beak in and swimming around. So that was awesome. Went to the Bounty Islands next. Some more birds here. This is where a lot of fulmar prions breed, and they're distinct because they visit their breeding colonies during the day. So we got to see a raft of them in good daylight and be like, oh, these are all fulmar prions because they're at their breeding colony during the day. You don't have to worry about all the bill size or anything like that. Endemic shag out here as well, and then more red-crested penguins. The Bounty Islands are literally like 30 massive rocks in the ocean, and that's it. There's like almost no vegetation, just like crazy steep cliffs. Almost all of the birds on the rocks here are erect-crested penguins. This is their entry point to the ocean. So there's this little trail that they walk all the way up these rocks. It is insane, and they don't have hands. I don't know. It's just crazy. We had some cool footage of these massive groups of erect-crested penguins just going past the ship, porpoising. And we also had, so the other thing with the Bounty Islands is it's the main breeding location of the entire world population of Salvin's albatross. So we were in proximity of the islands. We were seeing rafts of albatross, just like crazy concept out here. Yeah, just unreal. All Salvin's albatross, and like I said, all birds with like 7-8 foot wingspans. There they all go, just taking flight. Yeah, the Bounty Islands are really cool. We didn't get to go out into any zodiacs. These islands are so exposed that there's almost no lee from the conditions. So we were just ship cruising around, but that was good enough for me. Finally, we went to the Chatham Islands. We did some zodiac cruises around some of the offshore islands there. Shore plover is like this critically endangered, beautiful, beautiful seabird that breeds only out on those islands. We have the pit shag as well, beautiful. We also got to see the Chatham albatross, which is a gorgeous bird, really dark gray head and that orange bill. The entire world population breeds on this one rock. So all of these birds soaring here are Chatham albatross. This is the pyramid, that's what it's called, literally on Google Maps. If you look up the pyramid, it takes you here. This was like unreal. We spent like, I don't know, 30 minutes to an hour just like doing a slow ship's cruise around and just appreciating the breeding location of these birds. It's, you know, it's a big risk if you're a seabird and your entire world population breeds on one rock. They've done a lot of work to try and relocate them to some other sites. You know, they've taken some chicks, they've put decoys out, all this stuff, and somehow the birds always find their way back to the pyramid. There's something about it that these birds, you know, just don't want to give up. Here's like a zoom in of what we're seeing. So all sorts of Chatham albatross. There's like 10 chicks in here. If you look closely, I think there's like one down there and one there. And yeah, super cool. The other cool thing about the pyramid is there is a single pair of Indian yellow-nosed albatross that breed on this massive rock. So you have your Chatham albatross, and we have this guy. Does not look like all the other ones. I don't know how that happened, but they've been returning there for a few years, and I think they nest kind of in the same-ish area. So some of our guides are able to spot it, and we tried to then get 140 people on this one tiny bird on this massive rock. Most people saw it, but yeah. And then finally, what I want to just mention before we close up here, when we actually got into the main Chatham Islands, we got to visit the Sweetwater Reserve, and this is where most of the magenta petrels are breeding, the tychos that we saw earlier at sea. So like I said, a couple hundred individuals tops, world population. They're super at risk of introduced predators to their island. So the Sweetwater Reserve is fenced off. They have traps like everywhere. And this guy right here, Dave Boyle, is one of the few people that's like dedicated his life to these birds. I mean, he walks like dozens of kilometers every day, checking traps, monitoring the nesting activity of them, spotlighting. So something that they'll do, these birds visit their breeding colonies at night. So when just before breeding season, new moon, they'll put out these big spotlights, and that light will attract these birds to come in at night, and that's how they'll net them and record their measurements, band them. And if a bird has peat on it, that means it's been digging in a burrow. That means it's a bird that's going to breed, and they put a geolocator on it. Then they let it go, and then a few weeks they try and find where in the forest this bird has created a burrow, and then that's one of their burrows that they're going to monitor for the entire breeding season. So Dave brought us to the burrow of a non-breeding bird. He was able to take it out of the burrow for us for a few minutes so we could see it, and that's how we got these photos. But yeah, it's not something he'll do with a breeding bird. Taking a bird out of its nest when there's an egg is far too risky. But yeah, there's one non-breeder. He lost his mate last year and hasn't repaired yet. So anyway, yeah, that's the end of the talk. It was a lot. Thank you for bearing with me. Yeah, a lot of these photos and more will be on my Instagram. Do we have time for questions? Okay, that's fine.
John's
Yeah.
Instagram is there. You can DM him there, or you can figure out how to email me, and I'll get a tip. Okay, that's it.
Yes.
Thank you guys all for coming. Thank you, John, for talking with
Mhm.
us. And wanted to remind you one more time, we're so excited to be moving to Hopkins starting next month for 6 o'clock lecture. Starting at 6 o'clock, doors will open at 5:45. And then we have time. Then we have time for some community building afterwards. If you want to stick around, we'll have our refreshments and stuff after. Hang out for a little bit, rather than us all being like, oh my gosh, it's 9 o'clock at night. I gotta go home, go to bed. We're trying to fix that a little bit, help make it more accessible to everybody. So thank you again. I did put out the flyer about our new job. I did forget to mention, if any of you know graduating high school seniors, we do have an essay contest, that's a scholarship contest, the 500-word essay, so not a long one, that we do free scholarship awards, $2,000, $1,500, and $1,000 to graduating seniors in Monterey County. So thank you guys all. Have a great night.